Hey, good morning, everyone.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for coming today.
Oh,
How's everyone
nice day.
doing?
Great.
Good, good. Okay, so before we get started this morning, I'd like to explain a little bit about what we're doing. Good morning, Audrey. Yeah, and if you'd like to turn on your cameras, go right ahead, because today's presentation has the option of you being visible or not, or choosing to not be visible, right? These recordings will be uploaded onto YouTube, so we want to respect your privacy. And if you don't want to be on screen, that's totally up to you. So today I'm going to be modeling partly how to create ceremony on Zoom. And if you're going to join me in that, then you'll need your cup and you'll need your pot of tea. I haven't poured my cup yet. That's part of the ceremony. So cup is empty. As well as your candle that is not yet lit. Okay, that's also part of the ceremony. And I just want to go over how to unmute yourself and how to turn on and off your camera. So you can do that on the bottom of your dashboard on the left-hand side. You're going to see a camera icon. And if there's a red line going through it, your camera's off. And likewise for the mic. And I also want to bring your attention to participants on your dashboard. And if you don't have a side panel with the participants of today's webinar up, click on participants and you'll receive a side panel with everybody's name. And from there, I'd like you to find your name. And if you click more beside your name, you're going to see the option to rename yourself. And if anyone's having problems finding that, just let me know. But I just want to highlight where to find the rename option before we get into our presentation today, because that'll also be part of our ceremony, is renaming ourselves. Okay? All right. So we are at 10 o'clock and we are going to begin now, and we begin with acknowledging that we are being hosted today on Coast Salish Nations, traditional and unceded territories. Those territories are Kwantlen, Katzie, Tsawwassen, Semiahmoo, Stolo, and Saanich Nations. And standing alongside the Truth and Reconciliation Accord, it behooves each of us to investigate our histories with these lands and our access to the resources connected to these beautiful lands. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to begin sharing my screen. So, the power of human connection, the heart and soul of palliative care. And just reviewing the definition of palliative care, palliative contains 5 domains of care. So we have the physical, the spiritual, the emotional, the cognitive, and the social. And the beauty of the work that we do in hospice is it's not just the medical model, which is very important, but it's whole person care. And that's what I'm touching on today, is whole person care. The learning objectives of my presentation are to support individuals and their families in bringing the meaning and spirit of their culture and beliefs into their end-of-life care. So I'm speaking to those of us who come from a house of faith tradition, as well as those of us who do not. and those of us who live in blended families of different faith traditions. So what I'm offering, I hope that you can apply to however it is that you find your relationship to the world. When we are able to participate in the meaning making of our experience, we are able to shape our perspective and the window through which we see. So I hope that my presentation today does not come across like this is going to make it all better when someone dies. It's not that at all, but this can help. This can ease the way. Throughout my presentation today, I ask that you be gentle on yourself. If you need to take a break, please do so. And know that you'll receive a recording of this later in your email box. Take what you like and leave the rest. What I have to offer may not suit everyone in every situation. I don't expect it will. And we will have time for Q&A at the end. And in that space, feel free to ask for what you need. If there's something that I do not know, I'm always happy to research and or accompany you while you find your own answers. So palliative care, the long and winding road. Now this is going to repeat a lot of what Rachel Paget had to say about, assessing our values, as well as what Trevor had to say, and even what Rick and Stan were talking about. But it's purposeful to repeat over and over again. What matters most in our daily lives? And this is for the person living with the disease as well as their caregivers. Research has shown that identifying our values early on and updating those conversations, and here I'm talking about advanced care planning. When we take care of our advanced care planning, this brings the most meaningful and positive end-of-life experiences for everyone involved. And tips from the advanced care planning team at Fraser Health, they say, schedule your conversations with the people who need to know so that when people arrive to these sensitive conversations, they are emotionally prepared. And allowing time for reflection, so giving space between conversations to reflect on what you shared, reflect on what you heard. Seeking support outside your inner circle. So those of you who are volunteers or have gone through the loss of a loved one, you know that sometimes reaching outside your inner circle is where you're going to receive the best support, simply because those relationships do not have the same investments as your inner circle relationships. Committing to returning to the conversation as things change. So the more we talk about end-of-life wishes and what's happening for us, the easier it gets. And that may not seem true, but it is. And at what point do we start thinking about leaving our legacy? We can start thinking about leaving our legacy at any time, not just at the final end. In fact, I would suggest that the final end is when we have the least amount of physical and emotional energy to do such. Sometimes it's the smallest things that matter most. So from a ceremonialist point of view, I didn't take the time to introduce myself and more of my background, but I come from the healing, creative and healing arts. I am a certified funeral celebrant and celebrant of healings and transitions. And when I'm reading out loud the small things such as our familiar daily routines, I'm also talking about our familiar daily rituals. So where we find sacred time, the start of our day and the end of our day. Those are the two big markers of when I do these things, I feel right in my world. And that might be finding your cup of coffee and turning on your favorite news channel. It could be finding your cup of coffee or tea and having those moments of communion with the God of your heart. And how you end your day, those familiar phrases that you share with your family to close your day. What I'm suggesting here is that we keep these up, even if they are abbreviated forms. They will help to bolster us through end-of-life experience. How we spend our leisure time. We often don't think of leisure time as purposeful, or that it has that it strongly helps me to feel like myself, even if it is watching television with my favorite snacks and my favorite clothes. It could also be golf on the golf course. It could be any manner of experiences with myself and others. But how we spend our leisure time is really, really important. And I would say that it's one of the sustaining things, especially if you're a caregiver, that's going to help carry you through the end-of-life journey. Why a ceremony? So here, you know, a lot of us, when we think of ceremony, we think of a funeral, as far as end of life, or a wedding. Birthday is a ceremony. Ceremony in its pure definition is a space outside of regular time that helps us cross from one state of being to another. So that could be, you know, turning from age 29 to 30. You know, that's a big shift for a lot of us. And throughout the end of life journey, there are many stages that one goes through, from the time of diagnosis, from the time of perhaps receiving treatment, and so on, where there are markers, there are noticeable bridges. And you're going to start hearing me talking in symbols more. This is the language of ceremony. And it really does match the end of life journey. Like, even that journey, we're calling it nowadays a journey, whereas 50 years ago, we called it a battle. Something to consider. What I have on the screen is some embroidery thread, and this is with the intent of a very simple ritual that can be done at bedside. And I'm thinking also, if you have family that's hundreds of kilometers apart from each other that are unable to join you because of COVID, but you want to create that feeling of connectedness, is that everyone, including the person that's living with the disease, ties on a bracelet on their dominant hand to symbolize we are all going through this together. And you could make this part of your Zoom ceremony as well if you wanted to. And then as the person living with the disease transitions into the active dying phase, the whole inner circle, including that person, would shift the bracelet to the non-dominant hand to signify that change. And that everyone would keep that bracelet on for an agreed period of time. Of course, the person living with disease would pass away with the bracelet on. And that continuing symbol of the bracelet on those who remain is the grief that they all share. That symbol could also be woven into ceremony at a later date. I have the bottle of Coca-Cola. I have a friend, I chose that because a good friend of mine recently, her mother died, and the last 3 months her mom lived off of Cheetos and Coca-Cola. And it was at first, to my friend's upset, that that there wasn't more being done to give her mom nutritional food, but she soon realized this is keeping mom alive. And after her mom passed, she did take a bottle of Coca-Cola, empty bottle, and put flowers in it beside her mom's bed. And that was her way of creating some personalized ceremony pieces. Consider the healing words you need to say and your person needs to hear. I'm sorry, I thank you, I forgive you, I love you. These are the 4 sentences of the Ho'oponopono from the Hawaiian people. I would also add to this goodbye. I'm just going to reflect personally. My father died approximately 30 years ago when I was a young adult. And when I think of the purposeful things he said to me prior to his death, I'll never forget those words. But the years prior to that, a lot of those conversations are so faded from my memory. But I'll always remember the short, purposeful phrases my dad said to me. And so I give this to you to consider as well. Partly because how we say goodbye will reflect on how those who remain will grieve afterwards. In the bottom phrase, I've kind of scripted a very simple ceremony that I would imagine at bedside. And so either care provider or person living with a disease says, this is something I would like to share. There is something I would like to share with you that is very important to me. Please take this moment to receive what I have to give you. So this is what's making it ceremony, because you've just asked them to step out of the regular time, and what I'm doing now is very sacred. I want you to remember this occasion, and that is why I'm lighting a candle and I've prepared the room especially for the two of us. I want to give you Now I'm going to out myself here. I am a end-of-life ritual nerd. So those of you who are nerds with me, you will appreciate the ritual use of the 4 elements. These are what I hang ceremonies upon. And because each of the elements are transformational. And when we think of air, we're thinking of breath. We can start a ceremony with, all right, let's all take 3 deep breaths. We can start a ceremony with a song, or with a reading, or saying what's in your heart, and opening a window. These are all different ways. Water symbolizes, among many other things, purification, making a wish, making a toast, washing away, a blessing, with a gesture, throwing a rock into a body of water. And fire, the candle, the spirit, the burning of regrets. And earth, the seeds for the future, breaking of bread. So in sharing these, I hope that this brings to mind for you your own ideas, because it's really what we apply to this. We are the makers of the meaning. Adjusting to end-of-life changes for the person living with the disease and their caregivers. And here I'm thinking of environmental supports such as aromatherapy, music, color, pets, bringing in nature, recorded prayers, faith, iconography, family photos. You can see I've mentioned pets twice in the complementary supports because pets are so vitally important at end of life. In fact, research shows that is where people turn 90% for relief. Pets are so responsive to our needs. In the active dying stages, sensing where your person is. So many people go through a kind of memory regression, and quite spontaneously a life review will evolve out of this. And those who grew up speaking their mother tongue and then grew to speak a second language, people sometimes regress to speaking their mother tongue again. And I'm sure many of you volunteers have experienced that. Using metaphoric language. You know, I want to go home, or I need my keys. I need to get my shoes, my tickets. I'm about to catch a plane, a train. All of these symbols of making the journey. Dreams are visitations of the deceased loved ones, and this has become really commonplace for our palliative nurses to take note of when somebody has a dream of their deceased loved one, or seeing them, having a visitation of them at their bedside or in the room with them. That's very significant, that death is approaching. Ruminating thoughts of significant events. So again, a kind of life review, but in the sense that that person's attempting to reframe it. I'm not going to read through all of these, although I do want to say the assuring meaning to people's lives. That is vitally important, that meaning-making piece. And at end of life, that is something that people are often really looking for validation, that my life mattered. Often people, the caregivers, they're at a loss of what can we do during the active dying phase, and remembering aloud loving stories from family history, sharing them around bedside. Songs to soothe, very soothing to the person who is actively dying. Deathbed conversations hold a mythic power. And I want to pull this one out specifically because sometimes we make vows at bedside that later we may not be prepared to carry through. So just really being cognizant of the power of those deathbed conversations. It's also a hugely potent time for healing relationships. Stephen Levine talks about all the energy, all the vital energy of the body moving to the heart, but also all the spiritual energy moving to the heart chakra, and how that is a very potent time for healing. And I think we all wish for that. Noting if the person prefers touch or no touch. So really tuning into your person. Sometimes people at end of life, they do not want to be touched, and other times it's very soothing. And the active dying phase may be a time to vigil, and I will explain vigil a little bit later. All right, so now we're gonna get to our ceremony portion. And if you would like to join with your camera on, now would be the time to turn on your camera. And if I want you to imagine that you're connecting with your inner circle people, and you may be hundreds of miles away from each other. And so this ceremony is really to help include everyone in this experience together. So here I have my candle, and I have my pot of tea. And my first piece, I would ask that all of us pour ourselves a cup of tea. And let's take a deep breath together. One big inhale together. And then smell the tea. Go ahead. And if it is the right temperature for you, go ahead and drink the tea. And ideally, you'd be all drinking the same type of tea. So if this was Darling Jing tea, everybody's receiving the same scent. And that is connecting us as well. And on top of that, if we were drinking the favorite tea of our person who's living with a disease, that would be another layer of meaning. We're all drinking her tea. And the next time you take a sip of tea, I'd like you to close your eyes and focus or distill your experience right now. Try and distill it into one word. And then going up to your participants panel and renaming yourself, renaming your last name to that word, to that one word. So I'm going to do that now. Good. And if you'd like to do the same, go right ahead, and everyone will be able to see what you've written through the participants panel. And then holding up your candle and repeating to yourself the word that you've just written, the word that you've just named as you light your candle. Good. So these are using the senses, ways to help connect us online. Okay. So like I said, the tea, the scent, the power of scent will always bring back memories. And if we were all sharing the same cup of tea with the same scent, every time you have a cup of tea, of that tea, you will be connected to the experience of the ceremony. You can see how you can also weave into such a ceremony your existing family, cultural, religious traditions. And if this were an end-of-life ceremony prior to the person's passing, you would want to reflect on where the person is now in present time and give some expression to how, as individuals, each person is feeling. So through those names, through renaming yourself, you can share in some way, but also communally, how's that feeling for your inner circle? And then ending your ceremony with words or gestures, prayers of support to carry on. This is for folks who are unaware of what a vigil is. I know many people who are watching this today are part of our hospice volunteers, and you know well what a vigil is. A vigil is a time for family, friends, and community to provide support and physical presence for the dying. So I like to think of this as dying support. You know, we think of life support when someone's in ICU to help them stay alive. Well, this is support to help people ease through that journey, both the person who's living with the disease as well as their family. And what a vigil, the intention of the vigil is to bring a calm presence. It's not to talk about the hockey game. It's a time for sitting together. Could be shared silence, sharing stories, healing touch. It could last for days. And it can also lead into family-led death care. If the vigil is long, vigil sitters may take shifts. And if the dying person or family would like someone to be there continuously. And that's where our hospice volunteers come in non-COVID times. We have an amazing vigil team. At the time of death, thinking of a home death in a home or in facility that is someone's home, an expected death is not an emergency. So this is repeating what Rachel shared with us. Take time to be with the experience. Make a pot of tea. And I can't emphasize this enough. You know, for those of us who come from a house of faith, you know, you have prayers or you have traditions that can lead you through that experience. For those of us that don't come from a house of faith, death can be perceived as an emergency and that the professionals need to be called right away. As an end-of-life funeral celebrant, I'd like to say, take as much time as you need. When the nurses say, take as much time as you need, really take as much time as you need, because you won't have that opportunity again. What if you were not with your person at their time of death? And we see this often in hospice, you know, the person who has really been there with them all the way through, who has marathoned with that person. And then they step out to get the cup of coffee and their person dies. And then the whole flooding of feelings because they weren't there. I would like to offer different perspectives in that, you know, if you were with that person all the way through the marathon, but you weren't with them at the exact point of the finish line, I think the time with them still really counts. And as well, as many of you know, all the faith traditions do recognize that after death, their spirit, their soul is there, and that hearing is the last sense to leave, and that it is also another time to be with them. It can be a very peaceful time after they have passed on to be with your person. Tending to your faith traditions, your multi-faith traditions, if you come from a blended family, spiritual practices. Your person may want you to read something right at the time of death. It could be poetry, prayers. And then addressing what if you were far away from your person and you received that call, it was an unexpected death, and how do you deal with such a situation? And I often think of this because I'm an end-of-life nerd, but to not get caught up in the circus of events that takes place when such a situation happens, but to give yourself the time to be grounded, perhaps find a photograph of your person, have that heart-to-heart communication with them, and really connect with them on that spirit level, calling in the God of your heart, before tending to all of the rush of details that takes place when there is an unexpected death and you're not there. Okay. And family-led death care. In collaboration with your medical team and funeral provider, family-led death care is a legal and viable choice for those of you who wish to take more time with your person after death and before the funeral professionals become involved. So I'm anticipating that many of you on the call today have living memory of this kind of family-led or faith-based community-led death care, and that we are seeing a resurgence of this, that people are are looking for more ways to participate through this experience. And so I offer something very, very abbreviated to take the time to wash your person's face, hands, and feet. And with again, abbreviated phrases that you can personalize. We bless these eyes that have seen. We bless these hands that have created. We bless these arms that have embraced. And we bless these feet that have walked. Very loving care, reverent body care is what I would call it. Okay, so wrapping up what I have to offer in this part of the ceremony. And I'm going to stop screen share and come back to my candle. So if we were having a ceremony together, we would close with taking a moment to again distill all our feelings, our experience into the present moment. And then together on screen, blowing the candle out and saying goodbye. Okay, so like I said in my email, at this part of our presentation, if there is anybody who would like to share with the group experiences that they have had at end of life, as a participant, as a witness, and if you're speaking on, as a volunteer, to remember confidentiality, to frame it in such a way that people's identity is remaining confidential. If anyone has inspiring words or experiences they'd like to share, and if anyone has questions or comments, they can put them into the chat box. Okay, so I'm not seeing anyone come forward, which is fine. And I know it can be intimidating on Zoom. And if we were live in a circle, I think there would be a lot more sharing. I thank you so much for your time today. Have a blessed day. Bye-bye.